Hi everyone. So seniors, this will be your last video from me. And I hate that this is the way that we are saying goodbye to each other, but you know what? Whenever graduation happens, whether it be June, July, I don't care when it is, I will be there. And I hope that we can catch up with each other and say a proper goodbye. So I hope this is not a real goodbye. For the rest of you, juniors and sophomores, we'll still have a few more videos after this for a couple more weeks, so stay tuned for more. So in our last video, we discussed the law of sines, and to refresh your memory, it is used when you have an oblique triangle, so that means not a right triangle, there's no 90-degree angle, and you want to find missing pieces of the triangle. So in our law of sines lesson, all of the triangles had one of these three things. Angle, angle, side, 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 angle, or angle, side, angle. So any of those, you would use the law of sines. So there are two more things that you might be given, and that's side, angle, side, or side, 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 and that would be the law of cosines. So it's a different method. It's not difficult. It's just you have to go about it a different way. So let's go ahead and get started. So in number one, notice you're given some information for a triangle. This is called oblique because it's not a right triangle. And notice that one of the angles, or the angle that's given, is more than 90 degrees. So that's an obtuse triangle. Could be an obtuse or acute. So I'm going to try to at least make it look obtuse with an angle more than an angle more than 90 degrees. Okay, so this one, they told us was 127 degrees, which was angle A. And then we have B and C. Those two don't matter, just put them in either order. And then we were told that side B, that's the lowercase b, is 8.54, and the side C, the lowercase c, is 15.78. Okay, so what were we given in this problem? We have a side, an angle, and a side. So that's called side, angle, side. The angle is in between the two sides, just like it is here. Okay, so the reason why we can't do the law of sines is that we don't know the angle and the side that's across from it. That's when you use law of sines, but we don't have that here. So there is another method called the law of cosines, which we will discuss right now. So the formulas are long, and notice that there are three of them. They're really the same formula, it's just that the A, the B, and the C are rearranged. So you pick the one that matches the problem that you're doing. So we are given angle A in our example. So you want to use the one that has angle A in it, which is the first one that you see at the top of the page. So I'm going to use that one. Let me write it down for you. It's A squared equals B squared plus C squared minus 2BC multiplied by the cosine of A. So that's the one you should see on your paper. So I'm going to now go ahead and fill in the numbers. I don't know the side A, that's the one that I'm trying to find. So leave A squared as a variable. B, I know, that was given as 8.54, and that will have to be squared later. And then there's a plus sign. Then C squared, that would be the 15.78, so we'll have to square that. Then there's a subtraction symbol, then a 2, and then B times C. So it will be 8.54 times 15.78. Okay, that'll look better. There's a 5 there. Okay, and one more thing, we need the cosine of angle A. So cosine of A is 127 degrees. Okay, so that's a very long formula. I took up the whole whiteboard to write it down. So that looks complicated, but it's really not going to be bad because we can type this into our calculator. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to set the whiteboard down and go to my calculator to show you what happens. Okay, since the formula is so long, you need to just be careful because it would be very easy to make a mistake, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, so one thing you want to check before you get started is your mode would need to be in degrees, because remember the angle that we're given is in degrees, so check that real quick. So then we're going to quit out of that. So we want to put that entire thing that we set up on the whiteboard. So it's going to be 8.54 squared plus 15.78 squared, then the subtraction symbol, a 2, multiplied by both of those numbers, 8.54, and also multiplied by 15.78. And then also multiplied by the cosine of 127. Okay, so after you do all that, you should get this number, 484.1426, and so on. Now that is not the answer for A, because notice in the formula that represents A squared. So now I would need to do the square root of A. So I'm going to do that right now. Now I don't want to round the answer, nor do I want to put that whole decimal in there because that's still rounded. The calculator had to cut off at some point. So I'm going to use the answer button like I did in the last lesson. So press second and then the negative symbol, that's answer. So what the calculator is doing is it's finding the square root of that entire answer. And then you'll find it to be this number. And as always, we're going to round to the thousands place. So that would be 22.003. All right, so let's go back to the whiteboard. Okay, so just as a reminder, when we did A squared, we got 484 point, and then there were more numbers, and then we did the square root of that answer. So it turned out to be 22.003. And since the original problem was given in feet, we should include that here too. So that would be in feet. Okay. So notice that was the only thing that they asked us to find in number 1, so we are finished with number 1. So if you need to, stop and catch up. Okay, so for number 2, we've got a triangle ABC. This doesn't give us any angle, so I don't really know if it's acute or obtuse, but it doesn't really matter. Just have a diagram so you can refer to. So we are going to find, let's see, what do we have? The side A is 3, so that would have to go across from the angle A. The side B is 7, so that has to go across from the angle B. And then the side C is 9, that's across from angle C. Okay, so here would be your triangle, and the directions say to find the largest angle measurement. So in geometry, you learned a fact that the largest angle of a triangle has to be opposite from the longest side. So because the 9 would be the longest side in the triangle, that means that C would have to be the largest angle. That's just a geometry rule that you learned a couple years ago. So we are going to choose the Law of Cosines formula, the one that has the angle C in it. So that would be the third one on your sheet. So it would have C squared equals A squared plus B squared minus 2AB times the cosine of C. That's the one we want to use this time because we're trying to find the C, which we know is the largest angle. Okay, so fill in what you know. The side C is 9, so that will be 9 squared. The A is the 3 squared. The B is the 7 squared. And then it's minus 2 times A times B. And then the cosine of C. Now this time I don't know C, so I'm just going to leave the capital C as the variable. Okay, now this one you cannot just type into the calculator like we did last time because we have a variable C. We don't know what that is. So we're going to have to go about this one a little bit differently, and we will do this just a little bit at a time. So if you were to do 9 squared, of course you know that's 81. Over here you're going to have to do this a little at a time. So right here we would have to figure out what 3 squared plus 7 squared is. So if you were to figure that out or put it in the calculator, you would get 58. Then keep the subtraction sign and multiply these three numbers next. So 2 times 3 times 7 would be 42. And it still is being multiplied by the cosine of c. Now you do not subtract these two numbers because the 42 is really attached to the cosine of c. So do not subtract. What you want to do is solve for c. So I'm going to begin by subtracting 58 from the 81 on the other side. So if you were to do 81 minus 58, that's 23. And then these would cancel. Be careful of this, that's a negative symbol. So it's negative 42 cosine of c. Then I will divide both sides by negative 42. Divide by negative 42. And you'll have those cancel. And if I switch it around, I would have the cosine of c equals negative 23 over 42. Notice I put the negative sign in the numerator because that's the typical way you show negative fractions. Okay, since we don't have the angle C, we need to use an inverse. So we will use the inverse cosine, which is also called the arc cosine. So that's what needs to be done here. So the angle C will be the arc cosine of negative 23 over 42. Okay, so that will be it for number 2. I just need to go to the calculator and work that out. Okay, so back over here. I will do the arc cosine, second cosine, and it was negative 23 divided by 42. And that would be your angle. So if you rounded that to the thousandths place, you would get 123.204 degrees. So for number 2, our final answer, 123.204 degrees. And that's the only thing we were asked for in that problem, was to give the largest angle, so we know it now. Okay, so that was it for number 2. Again, if you have to stop and catch up. Okay, so we've done an example of side, angle, side, and then the last one we did was side, side, side. I think I forgot to mention that, but that's what it was. So we're gonna do 2 more, but in this case we have to find everything. We have to find every missing angle and every missing side, depending on what we're given originally. Okay, so let's check out number 3. Okay, so we were given that C is 116, no we're not. No, we're given that C is 19, B is 14, and A is 8. Okay, so this is what was given in our problem. Now the directions say to just find all 3 of the angles. Look at the very top of the page in the bold print right at the end of the paragraph. It says if you have to find more than one angle, you should find the largest angle first and then work your way down to the smallest angle. So which one of these would be the largest angle? Well, keep in mind that 19 is the largest, the longest side, I should say. So across from that would have to be the largest angle. So we'll have to use C. So we're want to use the same formula that we used just in the last problem, the one that has the C in it. So it will be C squared equals A squared plus B squared minus 2AB times cosine C. Okay, C is 19, so it's 19 squared equals 8 squared plus 14 squared minus 2 times 8 times 14, and the cosine of C. Notice I have C as a variable because I don't know what that is yet. So like the last problem, we're going to do this just a bit at a time. So if you were to figure out 19 squared, that is 361. Because the variable is over here, you cannot just put that whole thing in the calculator. You'll have to do it a bit at a time. So just do these first two, the 8 squared plus 14 squared. If you were to work that out, that is 260. Keep the subtraction symbol and then just multiply these three numbers. So 2 times 8 times 14 works out to be 224, and it is still multiplied by the cosine of c. Okay, you do not subtract these two numbers because the 224 is being multiplied by cosine of c, so you can't do that. What you will do is subtract 260 from the opposite side. So 361 minus 260 would be 101, and then you still have that negative 224 cosine of c. And then I will divide both sides by negative 224. And I'm gonna just switch it around so it's cosine c equals 101 over 224. And I'm gonna put the negative sign on top since it's a negative fraction. And since I don't have the angle c, I'm gonna do the arc cosine of negative 101 over 224. So this is what you want to put in your calculator. I'm not going to show you that since I just did it in the last problem. But when you do that and round your answer, you end up getting that C is 116.801 degrees. So angle C, we know. Now this time, that is not the only information that we were asked for. We were asked to give all three of the angles. So far we only have the one. We have the largest one, 116.801. So now we're going to find angles B and angle A. Now the good news is you don't have to do all of this stuff again. You only have to do that one time, which is good because that was a little bit of work to get our answer. So I'm going to erase this since I have to go back and do some more work, and there's not a lot of room here. So let's see. Okay, so after you do the law of cosines one time, you can from there do law of sines, because notice now I have the angle C and I also have the side C, so that's a good time to use law of sines. So I'm going to say the sine of 116 over 801, 116.801 over 19 will equal. Now the directions say at the top to find your angles in order from largest to smallest. So which one would be the next largest angle? Notice that 14 is the next longest side, so that would mean that B is our next largest angle. So I would say it's sine B over 14. So this is law of sines like we did in the last lesson. So you would cross multiply. So if I did that, I would get 19 sine B in one direction, and on the other direction I would have 14 sine 116.801. Then I will divide both sides by 19, and I'll have sine B equals. So you'll put this whole thing into your calculator. Not going to do it, but that's what you would do. And you're going to get a decimal. But remember, that's not B, that's the sine of B. So from there, you would have to do the arc sine or inverse sine of the answer. So don't round the decimal, just use the answer button so it doesn't have to be rounded twice. So if you were to do the arc sine of the answer, you would find that B is 41.124 degrees. Okay, so we have to find one more angle, angle A, and that will be the smallest of all the angles. The good news is this is the easiest one of all. You don't have to do this again. You can use the fact that we discussed last time that all three angles of a triangle must add up to 180. So we just found B to be 41.124. So the only one we're missing is this A, and you can find that by subtracting from 180. So you would be doing 180 minus those two angles added. So if you were to put this in your calculator, subtract from 180, you would get your last angle to be 22.075. And now we have all three of our angles. Okay, so the thing to remember is you're going to start off by using law of cosines just to get your largest angle. Then you'll find your second largest angle by doing the law of sines. And then you'll find your smallest angle by just subtracting the other two from 180. So it's really not too bad. It just takes a little work to get there. Okay, so that is our final answer for number 3. So we have just one more to cover and we'll be finished for today. Okay, so this time we know the angle B is 115. So I'm going to try to draw this so it looks sort of like an obtuse triangle. So there's B, A, and C. So B is 115. We were also given that C is 10. That's the side C is 10. And then the side A is 15. So we have a side, an angle, and a side. So it still says to find all of the missing pieces. So that's what we'll do. So you're going to start off first by finding the missing side. That's this one, which we would call side B, and use the law of cosines to get it. So of your 3 possibilities in your formula, use the one that has the capital B in it, which would be the second one. So it would be B squared equals A squared plus C squared minus 2 times A times C times the cosine of B. And then fill in what you know. We don't have B squared yet. A would be the 15. C would be the 10. 2 times 15 times 10 times the cosine of 115. Okay, so this would be a lot like number 1 in that you could put that whole thing in the calculator. So when you do that, you would get B squared equals, and it's a decimal, it's like this, 451 point, ... There's more decimals after that. You want to find the square root of that number. So B would be the square root of the answer. Use the answer button so it's not a rounded answer. So when you do that, the square root of the answer, it works out to be rounded to 21.255. So that is your lowercase b. That's this side. Okay, once you've done the law of cosines once, you don't have to do it again. From there, you would find your second largest angle by doing the law of sines. So I will need to erase this, so catch up and pause the video if you need to. Okay, so we're going to find our second largest angle. Well, how do we know that? Let's see. Well, 15 is the second longest side, and that's across from A. So that means that A is the next largest angle. So that's the one I'm going to find next using the law of sines. So I'm going to say the sine B, B is the one I know, both pieces of. So sine 115 over 21.255 would equal sine of A over 15. So this is the law of sines that we discussed in our last video. So I will now cross multiply. So I would have 21.255 sine of A, and then the other direction would be 15 sine 115. And then I would divide both sides by 21.255. Okay, so you would plug this entire thing into your calculator, and that would be the sine of A. You will get a decimal, but that's not your answer. That is not A, that's the sine of A. So to get your angle, you would need to do the arc sine of that answer. And please use the answer button so you're not using a rounded answer. So if you were to do all that in your calculator, you would find that A is 39.762 degrees. And your last angle, the smallest one would be C. You would find that by just remembering that all three must add up to 180. So you would be doing 180 minus those two angles added together, 115 plus 39.762. So if you were to work this out on your calculator, you would find that C is 25.238. And then we have our last value. So try to remember on these problems, do the law of cosines first. That will deal with the largest angle. Then do the next largest angle using the law of sines. And then the smallest angle, just subtract from 180 and you'll have it. So I hope y'all are doing well, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Bye, seniors. See you at graduation.